everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. An early edition this week. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. To our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out, subscribe, comment on this podcast, and send it out to other enthusiasts. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I am the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, back from Banff, Canada, Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, back home. Good morning from my side. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 178 from the Mona M03, XPeng Mona M03 early in the week to the Chengdu Motor Show today. The last week of August and everything in between have provided the latest, what I tweeted, fireworks or shockwaves into the upcoming fall, which is in the China realm known as the Golden September, Silver October, 金九银十. It's meant...
Yeah, we're just getting started.
Yeah, because the way they use that term, because it's the season of harvesting, right? And the kids are back in school, I guess, all over the world, in China, in the US, at least in the public schools, at least. And which means...
My kids are back this week.
Yeah, which means, the summer kind of the lull turns into this mini, as you would term, mad dash before the final mad dash at the end of the year. And this was certainly a busy week. And we probably start off with Mona M03. Your initial thoughts, what comes to mind?
You got me mid coffee drink. $16,800 for a pretty full-featured EV. And man, that hit like a brick around the world. I think there was... I feel pretty good for XPeng that they were able to get a lot of attention from this. And, there was a comment out there on Twitter by one of the analysts that you and I know. And I think he has a decent number of bad takes, but he said that the Mona is half the price of a 3. So how can it compete? The Chinese don't look at it that way. I guarantee you that a Chinese consumer was looking at a 3. They can also look at the Mona M03. So, it's not a pricing thing. I think this is where the West kind of gets it wrong. They're trying to put their mindset on the Chinese consumer. And it's all about excitement. It's almost like a fashion statement that you get the latest car. And now that they're so affordable, it makes it easier. And which is a weird thing to say, right, Lei?
Yeah.
Because it is competing against the 3, in your opinion, no?
Well, I said it would be not only a Model 3 killer, but it'd be a BYD killer, and it'd be a Xiaomi killer. Because one thing comes to mind is the Mona M03 did what the Xiaomi SU7 couldn't do, which is price the vehicle at that price range. And then second, what comes to mind is for the first time in the 10-year history of XPeng, they finally have a blockbuster model in terms of the 48 hours getting 30,000 orders. All of their previous models, it wasn't like this. Obviously, the pricing has something to do with it, but I mean, you could, watching the press conference, watching the 10-year, the launch, He Xiaopeng definitely channeled Lei Jun and Xiaomi's kind of the vibe. So I think, throwing down a gauntlet, and whether good for the bad. And a sign, really, and I said it's kicking off this latest round of bloodbath, right? And we go from there. And my expectation, and Brian said in the earnings that the first full month of launch, they plan to achieve a new record for deliveries for a new model in the first month of launch. So I'm expecting 10,000, nothing less than 10,000, based on that drone footage they showed of all the parked Mono 3 being delivered to their, dealerships or showrooms or delivery centers. Again, high expectations.
And this is where I hope He Xiaopeng and Brian Gu have learned their lessons from the past launches, but also are looking at playing more chess than checkers, anticipating that there's likely going to be a response from a lot of players, including BYD, including Tesla, and they're able to weather that storm because the past, the P5, the P7, the G6, they've all seemed to get initial coverage, positive coverage, and then just fall off completely, right? And the only thing I can think of, Lei, that has been sustained marketing blitz is Xiaomi with the SU7 or the Su7. And I believe that's largely because Lei Jun is out front. Now, he seems to be a lot more personable on social than a He Xiaopeng or Brian Gu would be. But I just hope that they've thought this through and are able to kind of weather the initial storm that'll come, especially now that the Chengdu Motor Show, and we'll likely hear a lot. You and I always hear rumors, but we'll likely hear real news coming out of the show.
Yeah, and going to the criticism a little bit for XPeng is to this day, I think you and I probably feel a good analogy for XPeng. I think more than anyone else of these smarty startups is they've been like a 1 year, 2 year old kid learning to walk, and they somehow keep falling down and then get back up and then keep falling down. And to this moment, seems they've learned how to walk with the Mona M03 because it's the first time, like I said, that they've gotten this much order in such a short time period, making it a blockbuster. But the issue going forward is what I feel for XPeng, how can they make this sustainable? That it's not just one model, new model replacing a previous model to be the blockbuster. Whereas a Li Auto would have these L789, 6789 all selling good volumes, right? You see what I'm trying to compare?
Yeah.
That's the thing we need to watch going forward, right? They're not home free yet. And the caveat of the two of the trims of the Mono 03, the cheaper trims, is that they don't have XNGP. Remember that. They don't have XNGP. Only the Max version has the XNGP. So they're certainly trying to address the kind of the segment where, the bang for the buck, 100,000 RMB, these type of consumers, really probably the BYD chain, and they're certainly going to be different from the consumers that buy, let's say, the Li Autos, right? And we heard about Li Auto really trying to drive home the message of their end-to-end vision large model approach to smart driving. And you still have to wait until early next year to get the Max version. So that's the caveat, right? But initially, it looks like they're selling off the lots, right? They're
Yeah, and I think you make a great point. They're making a calculated risk. They're taking a calculated risk by saying that the people that let's say the buyers under 200,000 RMB aren't that keen to have the XNGP feature, perhaps.
Yeah, well, at the same time, XPeng has said, He Xiaopeng himself has said, on different occasions that they're trying to democratize that their
Right.
right. That's their USP, right? The smartification, the smart driving into more mass market, into more, TAM, right? So I guess right now the 150,000 renminbi or roughly the $20,000 is that line, right? So it seems to be that line right now with the
But that just
XNGP.
tells you, Lei,
Yeah.
that there will be another company that offers all these things for 16, 17 grand, because that's how the competition has been working in the China market for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And my expectation has always been that BYD would democratize level 2 plus intelligent driving and offer it as like standard, because again, to your point, Li Auto is a premium automaker. Let's make no mistakes about that, and make no mistake about that. And so we need to look at XPeng. We need to look at, Xiaomi is more of a value. I don't That's a tough one for me to call them premium, but what do you think? Do you clearly see them as premium, or kind of a hybrid a little?
Well, Xiaomi is like a Tesla.
Hard to define.
Yeah, it's hard to define. And I think in the 200,000 range, I don't see it as that premium. I think it's more. I mean, 300,000 above
And
should be. But
let's relate this to the United States. Rivian is being lauded for their R2, which is still going to be a 45 bare bones R2. And that is the estimated MSRP. What it comes out at in a year might be different, but they're being lauded by launching a $45,000 EV. And so that illustrates clearly to me the difference between the US market for EVs and the China market for EVs. And I also want to say this: the 20-year-old me, or 20 years ago, I wouldn't have cared about a $16,000 car, regardless of who was manufacturing it. I was all about the cool A6s and all the cool cars from the premium guys. But now I'm more curious about getting in this $16,000 car, looking at the fit and finish, feel how it drives, than I am about some of these much more expensive products. So there's a bit of irony that's not lost on me that makes me smile a little bit, because the most interesting sector or segment in the China EV space is the mass market stuff, because they're packing so much stuff under 25,000 US dollars.
Which is why that line between premium, luxury, mass market is very blurred. And what you can get for the 100,000 RMB range and the 200,000 RMB range, compare what you can get for a BBA in the 500,000 RMB range, is getting blurred. Comfort, feature, tech, material, finish, right? That's the thing why. Also looking at the Chengdu Motor Show, I just see this legacies being further left in the dust. For now.
And that's precisely why I said what I said at the beginning of the show. You can't price is not the way you segment products anymore, not in China.
It's what you get for that price, right? So
yeah, and so it just indicates a very surface level understanding of what's actually happening in the China market. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
And again, that's a very Western way to look at it. Well, this watch can't compete against a Rolex because it's only $500. Well, you know what? Very affluent people are buying Xiaomis. Very, affluent people are buying, more of the mass market brands because it fits their lifestyle and what they want. And it has a lot of features that they appreciate. So price is a factor. I'm not trying to underestimate the importance of price, but I keep on coming back to value. And your point about the legacies getting further and further behind is because they can't provide value.
Yeah. And just one more thing on the XPeng Mona is that I am a little bit worried Now we have this Mona M03 in this price range. Further ahead, long term, how does that affect the brand premium or the ability to price the cars higher? The expectation of, okay, XPeng is cheap, not the cheap, but because they were selling in the 200,000 RMB range and even higher. The P7s, right, the G9s are over 300,000 RMB. How will that affect their ability to have that price range coverage? Is something to watch. Are they going to be launching future models all in this price range? I don't know. Does that deteriorate the brand image, the brand positioning? These are some things to be watched, right?
And you can point directly back to BYD with its challenges. Now the Han and the Tang aren't premium, but if you go to Europe, they've priced them premium, so they're having problems obviously selling the Han and the Tang. They'll need to adjust pricing there, but they decided to launch two new brands. So is that in the cards for XPeng? Because we also have to remember that they are 5% owned by Volkswagen Group, and so there's going to be some influence from Volkswagen Group when it comes to that stuff. I think that they're probably freer to take risk because they have Volkswagen as their backstop or their backer. So,
and one more data just to compare Mona M03 48 hours, 30,000 firm orders. Xiaomi SU7 in 24 hours, they got over 80,000 quote unquote firm orders. So just to compare.
Yeah, and what's important, we can move on after this, but this was Mona M03 taking the mantle from the SU7. The SU7 created the floor for full-featured value EVs, and now I think the floor is now $16,800 for a decently ranged, full-featured, with the exception of L2 Plus intelligent driving. And it's significant because BYD is almost old hat that they ship so many products sub 20,000 US dollars. So,
and one more extra to mention, XPeng has BYD to thank for. Why? FinDreams. We gotta emphasize that. It's BYD inside the Mona M03.
Yeah.
So frenemies. I mean, cost-wise, right? They get the leverage.
Yeah, so it's frenemies.
Yeah, frenemies. And no LiDAR, right? That goes into the cost.
But LiDAR, I think, is now almost intelligent driving services aren't really, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, He Xiaopeng seems to be veering away from LiDAR, as does Li Auto, perhaps. I know Jiyue does it. There's increasing sentiment and the increasing use, as I've mentioned, the end-to-end and the large model approach. So we're gonna see that also bifurcate a little bit.
So let's do this. Let's move on to Chengdu Auto Show. I know you had posted about a couple of vehicle launches.
Yeah, I was following it last night while the show was going on. Some observations. Most of the new, let's say.
Let me stop you there, Lei.
Yep.
Can we do this every year, but I think it's very important because we also pick up new listeners. Can you talk a little bit about the Chengdu Motor Show and how it fits into the Guangzhou, Beijing, Shanghai Motor Show kind of hierarchy?
So the Chengdu Motor Show slots between usually the Beijing and Shanghai in April.
Oh, it's the third. You think it's the third?
No, I think well, yeah, no, I think it's probably fourth
or second. Okay.
Well, third. If we combine Beijing and Shanghai into number one, Guangzhou will be number 2, Chengdu number 3. So it slots between.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah. So in terms of timing, it slots between Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, which is in November. And the significance of Chengdu also is, believe it or not, Chengdu is, I think, if I remember correctly, the number 1 city in China in terms of the number of, let's say, vehicle park. Number is well over 6 million units. And the Western region in the summer, right? Hot pot. And by the way.
So Chengdu is in Sichuan province.
Yeah.
Chongqing is the capital, but Chengdu is the sister city, and it's a great town. Amazing, cool city.
While the auto show is going on, Chengdu currently has electricity restrictions going on. So that's something of another topic that it's maybe it's related.
We
to
should also say Chengdu is home of the pandas.
Home of the pandas, yeah. Volkswagen is planned there. Quite a few others. So
and it's a technology hub. There's a lot of tech companies there too.
Yeah, and traditionally the Chengdu Motor Show is more of let's say a shopping center more than an auto show, because when I went there, the first media days, their salespeople will line up next to the booth and hawk at you on the media day. This usually doesn't happen in Beijing or Shanghai, but Chengdu is more a sales kind of a setting.
And famously, back in the day, and it's not just Chengdu, but there are other car shows, smaller ones, but there used to be these guys, and it's normally older men from lower tier cities that would just bring bags of money, bags of RMB. You've seen that, right? So,
and then the other thing, obviously, you touched upon it, BYD bullying others. BYD had their own hall of all their brands, so that's something new. And then one.
So we should say, Lei, that it's the Chengdu / Beijing BYD Motor Show.
Yeah, the BYD bullying show. Because BYD also put up a kind of a street. BYD, the smartification. They put up a pool where Yangwang they can put in a Yangwang and have it turn into a boat.
Well, not only that. So you and I have been to BYD headquarters. We can say that. And then they have that wall of patents.
Yeah.
And they have that in Chengdu now too. So
yeah. So back to the observations. The type of vehicles launched, I find it interesting. Except the new long-range Macan, e-Macan, which was just under renminbi 600,000 or $80,000-$90,000. All of the cars that were either launched, unveiled, went on pre-sale, were either the 200,000 renminbi range or below. And there were quite a few Model Y killers, those with the sevens in their model names. We had the Zeekr 7X. Okay, it's a global model. We had the Avatar 07. We had the Luxeed R7. A bunch of other sevens. And then one model I tweeted was this Tharu, Shanghai Volkswagen Tharu, which is a compact SUV below the Tiguan. Went on flash sale, starting at 79,000 RMB. So I think besides that, I think it was obviously, again, we said BYD, all the other Chinese brands that were making news, basically. And the other one, basically BMW, the new generation of the X3L. And that's pretty much it, I think.
Do you know if Tesla's there? I didn't ask.
I think Tesla was there, if I remember correctly.
And it should be noted that Tesla also this week is rumored to be launching a refreshed Model Y. Now, refresh to Tesla means that they update a couple of front fascia aspects and maybe do a couple more cosmetic things on the interior, but I just don't know if that's going to move the needle, and neither do I think the 7-seat Model Y for the China market is going to move the needle that much. But I point to utilization rate at Shanghai Giga being a pressure point for them, a negative downward pressure point for them, that there's pressure for them to find new ways to sell more vehicles in order to keep that factory running above 70-80%.
For the time being, that 5-year no interest financing has actually worked wonders for Tesla for the time being. And they're losing market share, but they've kind of maintained that 60,000, 70,000 unit shipment out of Shanghai Giga.
Right.
So it's a matter of perspective. The pie is getting obviously bigger. and they're obviously losing market share. And you have these Model Y killers, Model 3 killers coming full front. And so it's only going to get, the pressure is only going to get deeper.
You raise a great point. There's only 9% tariff, so total of 19 point something percent tariff into the EU.
19%.
The seven seaters is going to be probably very limited demand out of the EU, but anything that allows them to keep the factory running and ship them, because the Model Y refresh that's coming for China is also probably going to be shipping to the EU. And as domestic demand in China continues to slowly decrease, you're probably going to see more exports from Tesla into other markets from Shanghai. And the 19% is not going to dissuade them from trying to ship more to the EU. So I don't see Berlin Giga taking on the refresh Model Y for a little bit from a production standpoint.
Yeah. And if you're trying to maintain margins, I think that's the no interest financing is a leverage to play.
Hey man, 1.99 in 1.99 in the US.
And also in Canada, right? I think they just launched yeah.
And so let's anything else on the Chengdu Motor Show?
The only other thing I wanted to mention Chengdu Motor Show is that Li Auto at their press conference announced something interesting. They call it 有监督自动驾驶, which means supervised autonomous driving.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. It almost sounds like the current NOA, XNGP, as if they're not supervised, which is not right? Obviously, they need to be supervised, which is L2. But they showed this one button push, parking space to parking space, autonomous driving capability in a video, which means if you have a fixed parking space at home and where you work, you can basically do a parking space to parking space. I think it's still ADAS, right? With the push of a button. I thought that was interesting, and still need to explore a little bit what exactly the supervised autonomous driving mean. I think Li Xiang, he mentioned earlier this year, they're trying to go into L3 capability by the end of this year or early next year. So it's kind of blurry of what exactly is they want to achieve. But it looks like it's the next iteration of this NOA game. And they just pushed out 6.2. These are happening lightning fast, the capabilities of and also the Huawei, I think you also mentioned in the newsletter, the Huawei Qianqun 3.0, I think now is going into different vehicles. Even BYD, right, signed the deal with Huawei Qianqun to catch up.
I think what's important, Lei, about the He Xiaopeng level 3, pushing into level 3, it's not up to them. I just want to let the audience know that's going to take a lot of city approvals, state level approvals, provincial. But
same for the Tesla robotaxi, right? It's more complicated than it is, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if Elon takes another trip to China before the end of the year, because the longer it takes for them to get FSD launched, even if it's limited, it just becomes more irrelevant, I think.
Yeah, so word on the street is that local China FSD testing has been delayed. I think I saw a tweet somewhere.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah.
So
it's not easy.
Well, I won't say who, but there's probably some CEOs talking out of both sides of their mouths where they say they welcome FSD, but behind the scenes they might be pushing for restricting it or pushing the launch, trying to push the launch date. So, but that just means that Tesla is probably working very closely with the Shanghai government, the local Shanghai government, to help them get it launched. And I think it's going to look completely different than what it is in the United States, at least in Europe. So will it be as effective with a lot of these changes or restrictions? I don't know. And it's, so there's the actual software, but then there's the data part. And in order to feed the beast, the Chinese data needs to be sent over to the US. And so a lot of negotiations behind the scenes, I'm certain.
Yeah, I think for the next 6 to 12 months, depending on when that new Model Y, I mean, Tesla's has their work cut out for them in the China market. They have limited number of levers to play with, either price cuts or that financing game in lieu of no new models and competitive, cheaper priced models.
And we could be we could be going into uncharted territory starting in 2025 because I think you and I both assume that the price war will continue through the end of this year. In January 2025, we'll have a 2-year anniversary on the price war that was started by Tesla. And you and I know, having spoken probably daily, weekly with our friends still in China, that the economy is not great.
It's not something to celebrate about when you say
Yes,
anniversary
yes.
price war.
It's
But
crazy that I don't look at the Mona M03 as a price cut, but it's just almost a reset of the market.
that's the other thing. I called it the He Xiaopeng post a price cut on launch trick. But
So, because I think it shouldn't be lost on people that all of this flurry of excitement and anxiety, is almost masking the fact that the Chinese economy is not near as strong as it's been historically in the
no,
last 30 years.
food and beverage. I saw that chart that you put up.
But that's huge
It is.
because I don't have to tell you this, but you remember in 2016, 2015, you'd go to these new places and it would be mostly foreigners, and then a year later it's all Chinese people.
Even even Pinduoduo was losing money or something. I think I saw
Yeah.
somewhere there.
So
Yeah.
and so it's and a lot of my friends are in F&B, so I hear it from them firsthand.
Sure. And on the flip side, right, we saw, I know you had posted some stuff on LinkedIn on BYD, half of their sales global eventually. And then their latest
Did you
earnings.
agree with that post?
I think we can debate a little bit. I agree because
Okay.
He Xiaopeng also said their sales, half of sales, will be overseas. And it's likely BYD will be one of those 7 mainstream brands that will remain in the next 10 years, which He Xiaopeng predicted, right? And he certainly likes to be one of those 7. Put a question mark on that more than BYD. So, but still, I think it was interesting to see BYD maintain kind of the margins that they could do despite, you call it a price cut, launch these models at really ultra low prices. But their volumes went up, made up for it. So, I mean, 20% margins, right, for BYD still, despite the kind of which shows you the cost advantage that they play with.
Yeah, it is. This should point to, before we get to the 50% conversation for BYD, Roger Atkins, friend of ours, friend of the show, he had posted about the Vauxhall. He's a Brit. He posted about the
Frontera? Is it
Vauxhall
called
Frontera.
Frontera.
24,000 pounds.
25,
So it's
let's say
about
25,000 euros. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and a 29,000 US dollars. It starts at 25,000 pounds, 44
Pounds,
kilowatt
yeah.
hour
Yeah.
battery.
Okay.
And he basically said if Stellantis can do it, then why can't others? And this is the whole thing. I don't know what Tavares's accounting is, but I know that smart car platform. I did a little research. It is going to be, that platform is going to be used for 3, 4, 5 different brands that Stellantis has. And so I love that Stellantis and Tavares are leading the way, because if the foreign legacies weren't taking, or were not going to try to compete against China EV Inc., Stellantis, they have no presence in China effectively, except for Leap Motor now. They're trying to grow it, and they will, but Stellantis is right in your backyard, buddy. They're going to be here in the United States, and they're huge in Europe. And if you look at Latin America, Fiat's the number one brand in Brazil. So I love what Stellantis is doing. They seem to really, really be aggressively moving. I think they're trying to balance things with some of their still ICE vehicles, but 25,000 pounds, they're lowering the floor on the legacy side.
And that's something that the China EV Inc. has to watch for, because they're not, it's not, they're just going to take over, because you're going to have these type of Frontera models that will fight back. That'll be their own China EV Inc., right?
And you make a great point, Lei, because I didn't think about, I don't know about you. I'd love your thoughts, but let me finish this. I didn't think about any Europeans or American companies being able to compete against China EV Inc. Now I've thought about that for the first time in probably 18 months. And that's why you make a great point, because at least one legacy automaker is like, I'm not going to let you take this without a huge fight.
And that's what the 100% tariff is there for, to give this time for someone like a Ford to launch a similar, let's say a Frontera or something similar. For GM, I think they still have the new Bolt coming, which is the $30,000, right? So give them some time and see whether they can launch the type of more affordable EVs.
Now, so this goes back to our earlier conversation, where in the Europe it's still a price thing, because we haven't reached saturation from a brand or product standpoint. And so the first thing your eye moves to is the price. And because if you look at the specs, a $30,000 or 30 or 25,000 pound Frontera is not going to be able to compete at that price in China and from a feature standpoint. And Stellantis seems to be really, at least from a product rollout standpoint, moving aggressively to try to take share from the legacy automakers that they normally compete with in Europe and the UK and the United States. Because, well, I take that back. In the United States, I think the Equinox and the Blazer are getting a bit of traction, the EVs from General Motors. So kudos to GM. They also hired their third ex-Amazon employee that's working out of Mountain View now. I forget his name, but he works under Barris and David Williams. So, I'd mentioned that 5 years ago, Lei, that these people are going to have to hire executives from the tech industry, and GM is finally doing that quietly, but it's happening. And so we're starting to see it a little bit, but and maybe I'll wait till next week. But my charging experience while I was driving a Lucid was horrible. So we can talk about that a little bit next week.
I don't want to be in your position, so let's just say that.
Yeah, I think you were smart to buy the hybrid.
No, I mean it's my transition, right? So especially here in the US, I think hybrid is pretty popular. And speaking of hybrid, we got to mention this. Speaking of Hyundai, they are going to start producing e-revs in Europe and China in 2026. Think about that. And one of the reasons is because Hyundai has a pretty good hybridization platform. I mean, the Santa Fe hybrid drives pretty good, and the system seems, the mileage is pretty good. So that's I think that's the China influence, right? And at the Chengdu Motor Show, it was also interesting. They launched the 5th generation, the boxy Santa Fe, at the starting price point of under
it's like
a Cybertruck. It's kind of ugly, but it's cool.
But it's not as extreme as the Cybertruck. Cybertruck is super extreme.
I'm saying they launched this Beijing Hyundai, this 5th generation boxy Santa Fe at under renminbi 200,000 starting price, which I thought was, when I first bought the Tucson in 2006 in Beijing, the first SUV produced at the Beijing Hyundai joint venture, it was 200,000 RMB.
I didn't think you were so loyal to Hyundai. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So, and then at the same time, they launched the Ioniq 5N. They imported at 388,000 RMB. So it looks like they're playing into these different niche markets, trying to claw back. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, the EREVs.
I
But
love that they're not giving up on the China
yeah,
market. But you and I know there are other things that play there. So
you know who was at the Hyundai Way? There's the CEO Investor Day, Jose Munoz. And remember, I met him at the Beijing Auto Show. I'm sure he's once after that show, he was back home doing some homework, right?
I'm glad you brought that up because we should give Hyundai more credit on their hybrid technology because most of the world seems to only talk about Toyota. You and I talk about Toyota and BYD.
Sure.
But there are others.
But I think Hyundai, Kia, outside of the Chinese market, they're just on a different level.
Different level.
Yeah. And then they're the number, I knew we were going to get to this. They're the number 3, right? Behind Volkswagen, Toyota, and Volkswagen in global sales, the 100 million group.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, I know we kind of post this on LinkedIn as well.
So let's do this, Lei. It is 9:26. We're going to open up the room up for questions or comments, and then you and I can talk about this 50% from BYD.
Yeah, so I don't doubt it. And second, let me ask you this question. I kind of hinted at it. Is it too far-fetched to say that BYD can become the number 1 automaker in the world once this decade turns? Is it too far-fetched to say? I know you had predicted number 2.
I think a lot needs to, so here's the thing with that, Lei. To me, it's not a product bottleneck. It's a CapEx, speed to market from
regulatory,
because
yeah, geopolitical.
If they could ship everything from China, they could build the battery factories fast enough. They could build the car factories fast enough because they don't have 10 million units of capacity. And so we know because of the politics involved, they have to build factories outside of China now, where timing, speed is not in their control. It's actually probably working against them.
There's at least half a dozen factories online or being planned, right? At least half a dozen outside of China.
But again, this is where I feel, because I'm putting my supply chain hat on from in a prior life. So let's say they have 5 million units of capacity in China. They would need to build 5 million units of capacity outside of China, or some number like that. Be able to do that by 2030 in Europe, in Southeast Asia, in South Asia. I think that would just not allow them to get to the capacity number that they would need to in order to become the number 1, not by 2030. Now, if they had a long horizon, then yes, I could see them becoming the number 1 automaker for sure.
Would it be fair to say that capacity in China for BYD, I don't sense that they'll add any significant more to it? So let's say let's say 5 million. And this year, if they do 4 million, it's 80%, right? Which is very good. Which means if they want to get to number 1 globally, benchmarking the 10 million with Volkswagen and Toyota, they would need, another 5 million units of capacity outside of China? Am I making the math reasonable?
Yeah, because and assume that, this is the thing, they assume that a non-Chinese factory is normally around 300,000 units, right? And then, but the other thing, Lei, is that it's not as simple as building an assembly plant and building a stamping plant, because they need to build battery plants now. They need to employ people. And so in China, they have a lot more control. Shenzhen is a friend. Changsha is a friend.
Hefei,
Xi'an is a friend. Hefei, yeah. So this makes it, and so I don't believe the constraint would be on BYD's side, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And you just have to look at it like, what does Toyota's footprint look like? The other huge constraint, Lei, is that I don't see the 100% tariffs being lifted in the United States. And if you can't sell into the US, doubling sales or more than doubling sales in 6 years is probably an impossible task.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without the US, That's what I'm saying. Because they would, if you think about it, let's say China, they get to 4.5 million units, 5 million units, 6 million units. Okay. Let's say they're able to get to 6 million by 2030. They would need to ship 4 million units. And because the EU is the third largest market and the United States second largest market, they would probably have to do at least 20% of their sales in the United States, because the math doesn't work with the 100% tariff from the United States. Let's just say that.
So for reference, based on the first half year report, 1.6 plus million units, 200,000 exported, which is about what, 12%?
Yes.
12%, 13%. And we can expect both of those numbers to increase as
significantly.
Yeah, in the coming years. I mean, a 4 million unit would put BYD this year at least a top 10, if not a top 8, right? They're already a top 10. And you only imagine that they will climb that ladder further in the coming years. But it's going to be a lot harder. They have the 88 countries. They have the footprint. They have the markets. They're planning these factories.
And you know what's important also, Lei, is that Toyota has had this resurgence because of hybrids. And so to unseat them is going to be extremely, extremely difficult, just because Toyota's a strong, strong player. Volkswagen, weak. Hyundai, strong. And so I don't underestimate Toyota's capabilities to compete outside of China. And I'd love to see them do battle mano a mano, because to me, man, Volkswagen, I don't know if it's just hard for me to think that their best days are behind them.
Yeah.
It saddens me to say that.
Yeah, that's the other perspective. How, and if you're still able to maintain that 10 million unit a year rate is also a question mark.
That's what makes Toyota amazing, because they are a machine, okay? And they're able to sell significantly. Well, they don't sell that much in Europe, but in the United States, Japan, China, they do pretty well. But man, it's an exciting time. So for those that were wondering what we're talking about, there's an article. Stella Lee was interviewed because they had earnings this week, and she had said that in the future, 50% of their sales will come from abroad, ex-China. So I had posted, simple. Here's some simple math. They get to 4 million units this year, just under 4 million units this year. Let's double that, right? Because that'll be 50%. That means they're at 8 million units. And that would make them, based on 2023 sales numbers, the third largest automaker in the world. And my thought was that that's possibly reachable before 2030. Now, we just talked about in more detail, Lei, all these things that need to happen. And so that's a bit of an ideal state, because politics do get involved and stuff like that.
And going back to BYD bullying at the Chengdu Motor Show, they launched the new MPV Xia, which means summer, from the Dynasty. And that's just another play. It's basically a sister model to the Denza D9, but much cheaper. Okay. And then the Seal 06 GT in the 150,000 to 200,000 range. And they have more coming in the last quarter. They still have the bigger Tang, I think L and Max coming. So it seems this year that BYD has launched new models almost every other week. And it's just continuous.
It's impossible to keep up.
If they wanted to get to 4 million, they're at just under 2 million in the first 7 months. They'd have to do 400,000 units the rest of the way per month to get to 4 million. So yes, you're right. I think it's probably going to be a little bit under 4 million units for the year.
And my fear, Lei, is that come 2025, this EV surge that has been 3-4 years running in China, that balloon is going to deflate unless we see a lot better results from the overall Chinese economy.
Yeah, good point. Good point. But I think August numbers predicting to be. I saw some numbers saying it's 55%. I don't know if that was the CPCA prediction or it's only going to increase, I think, the rest of the way or maintain at the 50% level, right? Yeah, and just a matter of the right products and whether, like a Mona M03 is one example. And then you have the Envoy L60 is still yet to launch, which is another Model Y killer. And that product with BAAS is also probably going to have starting at around the 150,000 RMB range, most likely.
It's exhausting. I love it because you and I are just kind of nerds and this is personal for us because we know these people. We know these companies. It's not like we're reading research reports from the sidelines. And so I feel engaged because of that. And I don't want any losers. Unfortunately, you and I try to be as objective as possible. I'm unfortunately not one of those people that are trying to write titles that are too clickbaity, and maybe that's why we have a great audience. But we're not pandering either, right?
Yeah, and then seeing He Xiaopeng, seeing Jolie tearing up in their press events, that shows you the pressure of what they're under, of what they're against in this market environment.
And Joe is a successful entrepreneur, multimillionaire, and he cares.
Yeah, he just revealed some data that we knew, but it was right. Very.
I'm gonna do this, Lei. Will or Jiri, if you guys are listening and want to jump on and have a chat, Will and Jiri, are you at Chengdu? If so, maybe you can jump on for a few minutes if you're listening. Dude, you should be paying attention, Will and Jiri. But anyways, let's give them 30 seconds to see if they.
Yeah, respond. Will just review the Mona 3, right? I think so.
So you bring up Jiyue. We should also mention that the 07 is opened up orders. And I was reading that the supply chain has started to be filled with vehicles. And so I think they should be shipping them very, very soon. I'm a big fan of that car. And again, this car is what, $30,000, I think, Lei?
Yep.
But I'm super excited about getting a chance to drive it. It's like, oh. And
yeah, and then Li Autos had earnings, and I was predicting maybe they're about 520.
The share price got hammered.
Yeah, well, because one of the reasons is because the product mix L6 was kind of the driver in Q2, I believe, and L6 is their cheapest price model, and now they're trying to kind of work with that their autonomous driving capabilities, which actually the take rate is pretty high on their the 789 models. So, but I mean, yeah.
What do you think of that Q4 e-tron social media post that has the price at $20,000?
First of all, I think that was earlier in the year. It's not a recent one, but still.
Oh, okay. I didn't check the date.
Yeah, so. But it's one of those things. It's like the Tharu, right? You put up a price point and then you put a slash on it. And you put a much lower price below that, and it's fire sale.
Yeah, because somebody had responded or commented, and I was like, "This is the I can't give it away price."
Yeah, so take it.
Anyways, hey man, have a good Labor Day weekend, and we are rounding third into the final stretch of 2024. I can't believe we are into September.
The Shanghai Auto Show is less than 8 months away. Just a reminder.
Uh,
Still fresh from last year, man.
I
The shock
always
that I
get
had.
energy.
Uh,
Like, oh yeah, that's right. Because
the shock that I had the first time,
and it's always a different flavor. Shanghai and Beijing, always different flavors. So
and they have a beef going on between the organizers. The CCPID Auto is no longer listed as an organizer, and there's been a beef going on
for Shanghai.
Yeah, for Shanghai.
Anyways, I would expect that Shanghai next year is going to be very, very well attended with the visa free and all these other things going on. These companies will likely, there's a number of companies that will have likely run out of money, maybe, but I won't speculate. But and then you and I will get to probably test a bunch of cars. So, anyways, hey, have a good Labor Day for all our American listeners. Happy Labor Day weekend. And for the rest of you all, I think we're finally going to try to go video next week. I promise. So you and I need to do some homework, Lei. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We will talk with you all next week.
Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.